Italian Wine Podcast. Chin Chin with Italian wine people.
Hello, this is the Italian Wine Podcast. My name is Monty, Waldin. My guest today is Axel Heinz from the Ornellaia winery in Bulgaria, Tuscany. Did you bring a bottle of wine in with you today?
I have a bottle of wine with me. I choose to take one bottle of Ornellaia, maybe a vintage that is not quite unsignificant of climate change because it's 2012. I must say I picked it first of all because I like this vintage in this moment because it somehow feels like rediscovering a little bit of an underdog. It's true that in reality, in the early 2010s, we had a strain of really very good vintages, but the one that got the most attention was 2010. Although, 2010, 11, 12, and 13 were really four very good to exceptional vintages in a row, which have been slightly overlooked because of the fame of the 2010. So after a while in the bottle, it's always nice to revisit these vintages that have been a little bit under-evaluated and see how they look. It's a vintage we personally like quite a lot. Quite funnily enough, it's also a quite dry and relatively warm vintage, so it's an interesting thing to take a look at it, I think.
So the company's now owned by Frescobaldi.
Yes.
When Lamberto Frescobaldi comes to visit, what's his first question when he sees you always?
Well, I'm not sure there's one single question. There's always, how are the vineyards doing? How are we faring? Then there comes harvest. During harvest time, it would be how much grapes have we brought in today? Are we harvesting today? There are several areas. The common thing, though, is to consider, and that's something that most central Tuscan winemakers would tend to do, is to somehow consider that life in coastal Tuscany is very easy because, it's supposedly milder climate. We're close to the sea anyway, so it seems that everything is easy in coastal Tuscany, which is probably true to a certain extent. It's true that making wine at higher elevation with Sangiovese can be a little bit more challenging. So a general question would be, now is life still as good as it used to be in Bulgaria? Because it somehow feels to everybody from central Tuscany as if winemakers in coastal Tuscany were always on a constant holiday.
Yeah, no. So, in talking of holidays, what's your favourite job if you're in the winery or vineyards, and what's your least favourite job in the winery or vineyards?
There's hardly
I won't tell
anything
Lamberto that you've answered this, by the way. I'll keep it quiet, Lamberto. Okay, I won't tell him.
It's, if you're born as a winemaker, they're two having, yes, obviously the function of overseeing vineyards and winemaking. That is the more technical side, but then there's also a more management side, which is not always the most exciting one. You have to deal with a lot of paperwork. That's probably an unpleasant side of it. There's nothing really unpleasant about being in the vineyards, being in the winery. There are moments that, quite schizophrenically, you describe as being what makes the whole job exciting, being in the uncertainty of a harvest coming up and climatical conditions which you cannot control and which you cannot always foresee as well. So that's certainly what makes your job less boring than many others. But at the same time, when you're just about to live such moments, then you tend to instantly hate what you're doing. When you have a big weather storm, a hailstorm coming up just right before harvest, or any sort of dramatic, unpredicted climatical event is obviously something that when it's happening, you're hating it. But on the other side, in principle, that's also what makes a job exciting, the fact of not knowing what's going to happen the next day.
So what's your favorite dish with a bottle of Ornellaia?
I still have quite funnily a recollection of one of my first Ornellaia dinners I did in London. I believe it was in an Italian restaurant. Quite funnily, the main course was a very French dish because it was a tourne d'eau rossigny, which was a sort of very old-fashioned, quite rich dish. But it still is something I remember because I thought it paired really enormously well with Ornellaia, because it's a dish that has at the same time refined flavors, but at the same time it's got that sort of richness which is able to cope with a wine like Ornellaia that is, born under a sunny climate, and therefore has a degree of richness and fullness to it, which needs definitely, and which can cope with quite rich food.
And when do you think an Ornellaia reaches its peak? I know it depends on vintages, but roughly after 5 years?
I would say roughly it takes about 8 to 15 years in a good vintage, and beyond. It's really 8 to 15 years would be a sort of window encompassing all sorts of vintages. Some can ripen a little bit earlier and can be approachable relatively soon, but in a really classic year, it will take at least 10 to 15 years, and sometimes even slightly more for the wine to fully express itself.
Just show us the bottle so we can see. It's got a very nice label. What do we see on the label? If you hold it up to the
you see, I'm afraid it's a very, it's written a little bit in sepia, so it may not show very well on the screen. It just simply says Ornellaia, the vintage 2012, and then its appellation, which is Bolgheri Superiore.
Mm-hmm. And what was an Ornellaia? What isn't Ornellaia? Where does Orn come from?
It comes from a site name, which the estate originates from. It's very strongly believed that the suffix "aia," which you find in many Tuscan wines, has been a sort of marketing invention, but actually "aia" is a suffix that means field of something. In the case of Ornellaia, it would be a field of ornielli. The orniello is the Italian name for the ash tree. So an Ornellaia would have been an ash tree grow somewhere on an estate, and the saying says that most of the farms in Tuscany would have such groves of ash trees because the wood was at the same time very resistant, very flexible, and farm tools used to be made out of this wood. So there always would be ash trees on the farm because the wood was needed.
And you're certified organic as well, aren't you?
We are not. We're going towards the direction of organic. I think these days probably sustainable and integrated farming would be closer to describe what we're doing. We have been farming, though, about 1/3 of our surface organically since 2011. So we have accumulated quite some experience, but not crossing the step to being fully certified.
Okay, all right. I know that Frescobaldi's vineyards in Brunello, they're all very large vineyard. They're organic, and also in Chianti Classico. So I'm sure you'll get there. It's better to go gradually than to do everything in one go, and a lot less stressful for you. So I just want to say thanks to you for coming in today.
Thanks to you, and goodbye.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, thanks very much for your time. Hope I can see you on the coast.
Okay, great. Looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much.
Listen to all of our pods on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and on ItalianWinePodcast.com. Don't forget to send your tweets to @ItaWinePodcast.